Hello and welcome back to episode 7 of the It's Coming podcast. With James Bouknight on the shelf for the next few weeks after his elbow surgery, the Huskies let one slip away in their first game against St. John's since playing them as a member of the original Big East. On top of that, the game scheduled for Wednesday against Xavier has officially now been canceled after what seemed like the writing was on the wall when it was announced last week Xavier was having some COVID issues.
It's not all bad news, however, as four-star guard Corey Floyd Jr. announced on his 17th birthday last week that he'll be coming to play for UConn starting in the fall of 2022, which makes me feel really old because we won't be students here anymore. Anyways, he's the first player from his class to announce his commitment to Connecticut. We'll jump more into that later and talk about who he's trying to bring to stores with him. Plus, UConn Nation has raised over $50,000 for the Husky Ticket Project over the past 2 weeks, which is just incredible. So let's get right to it. Episode 7 of the It's Coming podcast.
Kemba Walker, step back, Walker, cardiac Kemba! And the Huskies are the top dog in 2011. El Amin comes over and says, we shocked the world. Up ahead to Bouknight to the rim, and a ball!
You know, people better get us now. That's all. You better get us now, because it's coming.
All right, and let's jump right into it with that recruiting news. Noam, yes, that does make me feel old too, looking at guys like Corey Floyd Jr. and realizing we're going to have to actually buy tickets to get into this game.
Yeah, it's a good thing you're going to have a full-time job
that
you're out of college.
One can only hope. Anyways, yeah, so UConn picks up Corey Floyd Jr. He's a 6'4" combo guard, currently playing for Roselle Catholic in New Jersey. Speaking of New Jersey, it's another New Jersey guy that Dan Hurley and his staff compete against the likes of Villanova, Rutgers, and other regional schools, for. Corey Floyd Jr., when asked why he wants to play for UConn, mentioned the history of the guards at UConn as a main reason for wanting to play here. I mean, that seems like a lot of guys that guards. I mean, UConn is a guard school after all. Scouting report on him is a very physical and well-built guard. And keep in mind, this is a scouting report for a guy he's still just a junior in high school. Like Noam said, 17th birthday was only last week. What's huge also is in his interviews, they asked him about who he wants to come play with him. And it seems lately a lot of commits have been more vocal about guys that they want to come play with them. You know, last summer you had class of 2021 commit Rasul Diggins saying that, I mean, he was right in the ears of Jordan Hawkins and Samson Johnson's. Like, he said to him, I think it was like, let's make it happen or something like that. So he was all over them. So when Corey Floyd was asked who he'd focused on bringing most, his answer was Connecticut favorite Donovan Clingan. So hopefully Floyd will be as good of a recruiter as Diggins, because as we all know, getting that huge 7'1" homegrown kid like Clingan would absolutely be huge for this program. In the past few years, you've had guys from Connecticut slip away and go to different colleges, and it'd be really great to get a guy like that.
My big takeaway from the Corey Floyd commitment, though, is that we didn't see a Rocky clip from Dan Hurley's Twitter, which was a little disappointing. But a couple days later, and we'll talk about this later, we saw something a little better from the head coach himself.
Yes, we did. But moving on, we're going to move on to life without James Bouknight, at least for the next 4 weeks, which could feel like an eternity for Husky fans and the team, depending on how they can play. Now, he had surgery on his elbow, and Hurley told the media, like I just said, look for him around 4 weeks, give or take. So hopefully it's give, not take. So Noam, how is this team going to be able to win these next few weeks without him?
Yeah, so the injury happened 2 weeks ago tonight, Tuesday, January 5th at Marquette. So we're not really sure if it's going to be 2 to 4 weeks from the time of the injury, from the time of the surgery. I know we did see pregame, Fox had some footage of him getting up shots, getting up three-point shots. He looked good, and he's all over his Snapchat and Instagram, with the little timers ticking down to his return. But it's going to be tough without James Bouknight, and the schedule really starts to ramp up now. So how can UConn win? That was your question. The answer is they need to play smarter and cleaner basketball, and I really do think it's just that simple. Without James Bouknight, there's no alpha on this squad. There's nobody who can just go out and get a bucket. So, how do you win games? Well, you got to score more points than the opponent, but if you're throwing the ball away, playing sloppy, you're not going to do that. So you got to win as a team. You have to play great team defense. You have to rotate defensively. Donnie Marshall talked about that time and time again in the St. John's game. You have to play smart offense where you don't throw lobs for alley-oops that have a 5% chance of landing on SportsCenter and a 95% chance of landing in the third row. That doesn't work, and they're doing that too much right now. You have to push the tempo when it's appropriate, but pull it out and run your half-court offense when that's what the defense gives. When you turn the ball over 14 times, shoot 40%, and only hit 15 of 23 free throws, it's going to be very hard to win in the Big East without James Bouknight, regardless of who you're playing. Now, lastly, this is something Dan Hurley talked about post-game. There's certain guys that just need to step up. He called on Jalen Gaffney specifically to play a bigger role, but then there's guys like Tyrese Martin, who just needs to become a more consistent player around the rim. And then there's RJ Cole, who needs to play more like the first 6 minutes and 58 seconds of the St. John's game, where he put up 12 points, rather than the final 33-02 where he only put up 6. So it's a team effort, but without James Bouknight, in order to win, you need to play smarter, cleaner basketball. So let's take a closer look at that St. John's game. I know I talked about a few things, but we all watched it. Martin Luther King Day, 2:30 on Fox. UConn came out rocking their throwbacks, and they jumped out to an early 21-7 lead with 12-17 to go in the first half. The shots were falling, the defense was good, things looked rosy. We saw Cook early, but then UConn took their foot off the gas, as we've seen them do multiple times this year, and it was really tight the rest of the way. Eventually, St. John's overcame a 49-41 deficit, and they went on to win 74-70. Now, as we all know by now, Adama Sanogo did not play after UConn went up 49-41, which was the final 12 minutes and 59 seconds of the game. Let's take a listen to Dan Hurley's explanation for why that was the case.
It was unfortunate that they played so small and they were making threes in the second half. So, going zone and keeping him in, just wasn't an option. And then there was no one for him to guard in man. But, he's probably the only good thing that happened today.
So, Matt, I know when we were watching this live, we really didn't like what we heard from Hurley post-game there. Now that we've had a day to think about it a little more, process it, give me your thoughts.
Yeah, well, to me, you have to find a way to keep your hottest player in the game. I understand it would be tough for him to guard certain guys that St. John's has that they were putting at the 5, such as Julian Champagnie, who he can really play, 2 through 5, stuff like that. But, Sanogo needs to get in this game. If Sanogo is getting guarded by a smaller 5, that means that there's going to be a mismatch on offense. Sure, there's going to be a mismatch on defense, and Champagnie might be able to knock down shots on the perimeter or be a little quicker, but there's going to be a mismatch both ways. The other option, there's a possibility you could switch to his own. I know it's not conventional of how Dan Hurley likes to play his defense, but again, your hottest scorer or your hottest player in the game, you can't take him out of the lineup just because the other coach changed up their lineup.
Yeah, I think it's a learning moment for Dan Hurley. There's been a lot of talk, throughout his coaching career, rightly so probably, about his rotation usage, and it's something that we've talked about the 3 years he's been here. And we love Dan Hurley, but he struggles with this stuff sometimes. And just because the other team is playing a smaller 5, you can't let that dictate what you're doing. You got to put your best player out there, and UConn couldn't score the ball those final 12 minutes and 59 seconds when Sanogo was out. They weren't nearly as effective as when he was in, so it was very disheartening. Now, another guy who got limited action was a Cook. He only saw the floor for 2 minutes. This was his 3rd game back from that Achilles injury. Here's what Dan Hurley had to say about him post-game and his lack of playing time.
Yeah, listen, what we're asking a Cook to do and what a Cook is wanting to do is it's a challenging situation because, he's a heart and soul. He's a pillar, of this thing. A Cook and Book are guys that, building blocks that we're building this thing around in year 3. To make this big move, and a Cook's not ready to be out there, physically. I thought getting him in there, up 14 was a good time, kind of similar to Butler. Gets driven, just kind of, just so much rust and missed so much time, and we're going to really have to just try to develop him in practice and. And just get him in a place where maybe he could help us at some point this year, but really building, throughout this year, into the summer, into the preseason, for a big second year from this. But he's going to have a chance to help our team, but he's just so far behind, man. Less than a year back from the Achilles. He's really struggled while he's in there, and then we've also, just like the bench guys today. I mean, we were minus 18, minus 10, minus 6. With those 3 bench guys there today. So, we've got it's a fine line right here, because he wants to play and, we want him to play, but, it's less than a year from Achilles. It's tough.
Interesting to hear that from Hurley, especially given, how much Cook wanted to come back and how Hurley talked for weeks and weeks about how he was, really close. And, I think Cook's got to get thrown into the fire a little more. I think he's got to see some more minutes. Otherwise, he's just never going to have a chance to ramp it up. Obviously, you got to protect him. You got to make sure he's physically fit. But it's a guy who thrives off the intensity of the game. And in these games where there's no fans, UConn needs him desperately.
Right. And just to be clear, obviously, you don't want to throw him in if he's not ready. I guess for me, it was a little confusing because, like you said, Hurley had talked about, he's getting ready, he's going to come back, and getting him up to physical pace with the game. So I guess when he was going to come, you thought like, all right, he's got to ease in like Hurley has said, but now it seems like Hurley kind of has flipped and said like, he's kind of far behind on the physical stuff. So, it's a little disheartening to hear, but, hopefully Cook can work his way back in. And if it's not this year, next year he'll be 100%.
Couple more things from the St. John's game. We don't want to dwell on it too much because it was left a bad taste in everybody's mouth, but it's weird only seeing Josh Carlton for 3 minutes. I know St. John's went small, especially late, but this is a guy, Josh, who was starting to find a little bit of a role as a 16 to 18 minute guy off the bench. And it was the first rough game for Tyler Pauly after his torrid stretch. He was a minus 18 on the night in, I think, 26 minutes, and he only shot 1 of 6 from 3, including that late one in transition with 9 seconds to go, and UConn down 72 to 70. But we got to put it all in perspective, and Matt, that's what you're here for.
Yeah, look, you're going to lose games. You don't like to lose any of the games that you lose, obviously. Some games it's going to be back and forth the whole game, and then you lose, and then it sucks. Some games you're up a bunch, and then you lose, and then it sucks even more. But look, you're going to lose games. No one said this team is going to have a one-loss season, right? Credit St. John's and credit their coach for the way that they played. They play up-in-your-face defense. They have some good pieces. Like St. John's, they're not an awful team. Like, this is still the Big East. Every team is competitive. Every team can, beat you on any night. And another thing about this loss, you're without your best player. And that cannot be an excuse for every game that you lose. But like we've already discussed, yeah, the team needs to win without Bouknight. But at the end of the day, it's only one game. Don't make a habit of it.
So we're going to move on to our MVP of the week. Matt, I'll let you go first on this one.
Yeah, for me, it's Adama Sanogo. It was his best game of the season by far. Also against the toughest competition that he's had a lot of points against, if that makes sense. Really started to get into a good rhythm and was scoring in the paint when it seemed like no one else on the team could.
And all that came in just 17 minutes. And what really impressed me the most about Adama was his footwork around the rim and his soft touch. He just looked really smooth in the paint, and that's something we haven't seen for a couple of years from a UConn big man. But my MVP of the week, and I said it at the start of the season, and I think it really holds more true than ever right now, it's James Bouknight. Yeah, he didn't play, and that's why he's the most valuable player of the week, because without him, this team is, slightly above average. But with him, they're top 25 caliber, they're upper third of the Big East. So it really just goes to show, it really highlights how important James Bouknight is, how valuable he is to this team.
Yeah, look at you turning around player of the week for a guy who didn't play. Anyways, we're going to move to play of the week, and for me, it comes from my MVP of the week, Adama Sanogo, and he did basically the same play twice, beating a double with some excellent footwork, like you just mentioned, and some good shot fakes. The one, Posh Alexander, well, the guy's only 6 foot, but he was all over him, and Adama was able to get around him and then get around the center for a nice finish. Noam, what is your play of the week?
Yeah, my play of the week, again, actually doesn't come from a game, but It was Dan Hurley throwing back some hot sauce the night that Corey Floyd committed to UConn. Just kind of a legendary moment. He opens the video looking at his phone and being like, yes, second big win of the week. And then he bumps shoulders with his wife and chugged the hot sauce. It was a small dose. It was like maybe 15 milliliters or something in a little medicine cup. And then, you hear him scream. He's like, let's go Huskies! And his face was just bright red. It was a good moment. It was good to see him getting in on the fun. It was a great piece that Mike Anthony wrote a day or two before that, just about, UConn culture and the community. And it was great to see Dan Hurley jump in on that as well. Switching gears, we're going to move to our under the radar takeaway of the week.
Yeah, for me, and it's always tough to find one after a loss like this, but it's that Julian Champagny, St. John's leading scorer, who's averaging 20 points per game on the season, was held to only 5 points from the floor. They sent him to the free throw line a bunch, but hey, you hold a guy for 2 for 9 shooting from the field, 1 for 4 from 3. I think that's a pretty good defensive effort. Now, obviously, other guys from St. John's had pretty good games. Posh Alexander had a few threes where no one put a hand in his face, and that's a separate issue. But you shut down the main guy.
My under-the-radar takeaway of the week is that there's just an absolute lack of a home court advantage in college basketball this season. You look on it at a micro scale with UConn, the Huskies are just 3-2 at home this season, and they're 4-0 on the road. And last season they were 14-3 at home, so they truly missed the crowd. When they go up 21-7, the crowd would just be going bonkers. Timeout, St. John's, Big Red would be getting the crowd fired up. They'd feed off that energy. A Cook would come in, he'd block some shots, and they'd put it away right there. It'd be over with. But instead, there's no energy. It's just the energy that the team brings. And I think I said this to you, Matt, last night. This is an instance where they really miss a guy like Christian Vital, a guy who just would come in and play his ass off. Just scrap for every loose ball, walk around with some confidence, some swagger, some energy, and they got to find that. They got to find it, whether it's from a Cook or Isaiah Whaley or Dan Hurley or James Bouknight when he returns. They just got to find that because there is no home court advantage in college basketball this season.
Yes, there is definitely not. And I do very much miss Christian Vital, which leads me into my overreaction of the week, which has to do with the fundamentals flawed with this team sometimes. More specifically, you are not going to get very far if you cannot hit your free throws. Now, right, the Creighton game, you don't want to put that game on one player. But what is similar between that game and this game? You missed a lot of free throws. Okay? After this game, UConn ranks 204th across Division I in free throws at a 69.1% mark. In the 18-19 season, when Hurley took over, they were 281st. So, an improvement. And hey, last season they were actually 78th, but that was with Christian Vital. So I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's like each guy struggles, right? Dan had kind of touched on it, how it's like, each guy's just kind of get their own, I guess. But something's got to give. I don't know. Bring in someone maybe that specializes in free throws. There are guys out there you could hire specifically for that. Because at the end of the day, you got to hit your free throws. The last national championship the team won, I think they were ranked at 4th in free throws. Obviously, every team that wins a national championship, you don't have to be ranked in the top 20, but being ranked 204th is not going to cut it, especially in close games like this.
That actually brings me right to my hot take or overreaction of the week. And I'm going to preface this by saying how much I love that Tyrese Martin is on this team. He's a great addition. He rebounds the ball terrifically on the offensive end. He's a good shooter, got a pretty strong mid-range game. But, James Bouknight is really the only guy on this team who can consistently finish around the rim and through contact. And part of the reason that this team doesn't want contact, they don't want to finish around the rim, is because they can't shoot free throws well. So if you're scared to go up to the rim and get fouled, you're not going to go up hard. Instead of going up and drawing contact and finishing through a guy, you're going to try and finish around him or fade away, and then you're going to end up missing a lot of layups. And UConn missed a lot of layups last night. So a lot of people on Twitter were talking about Tyrese Martin's inability to finish at the rim. According to our former UCTV sports member Jake Ferrari, Tyrese Martin shot 60% around the rim as a freshman, and he was up to 64% last season. This season, though, he's down to 50%. Now, hopefully they start falling because there's a good, like I said, 4 to 6 second chance points per game available for Martin if they do fall. But guys really just got to start going to the rim, looking to finish strong. They got to go up and finish through a defender, and if they get fouled, they have to go to the line confidently and hit their free throws. And the only guy I see doing that right now on this team is James Bouknight.
Yeah, and you know, both of these things that we mentioned, free throws, finishing around the rim, these are things that it's like, especially free throws, it's like, well, if you're not making them now, you got to think that this team will start making them later. It's one of those things where, right, like some guy, he goes up to the line, he's 1 for 5, and you're like, all right, he's going to make at least one of these. Like, he's due. So hopefully UConn is due. Now, we're going to move on to get him next time. This is pretty similar to what you had just brought up, Noam, but for me, it's the inside scoring. The first half, the 3-ball was keeping the team alive. They shot better from 3 than they did inside the arc in the first half. But then second half, poor finishing around the rim just doomed them.
It did, and they were 6 of 13 from 3 in the first half and just 1 of 6 in the second half. So it's kind of weird that they went away from the 3-ball since it was working so well for them. My get him next time, though, is UConn's help defense. Donnie Marshall, this one's for you. For every charge that UConn draws against Creighton, Matt will take a video of me taking a shot of hot sauce. That is how desperate I am for some defensive rotations. UConn does not rotate. It's all one-on-one man defense, at least against St. John's. They're a great defensive team overall, but when a guy drives to the rim, Brandon Adams, step in, take a charge. RJ Cole, step in, take a charge. Isaiah Whaley, step in, take a charge. Someone, step in, make it so that opposing players cannot get to the rim at will every single time they want. Mark my word, for every charge they draw against Creighton, I'll down a shot of hot sauce. All right? Now, speaking of Creighton, big game Saturday. In my opinion, it's a must-win game on the road against a top 25 team, national audience yet again. Matt, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, you got to win this game if you want to stay in the top 25 come Monday at noon. It's as simple as that, especially after you lose St. John's. But yeah, it's another big prove-it game, right? Now you're going to be without Bouknight, you know that for sure. And Creighton, they could be without Zagorowski, so maybe the tables would be a little even. As of when we're recording this, he is listed as a game-time decision for the game against Providence. So, the way I look at that, I'm thinking 4 more days, he'll probably be fine by then, but we'll see. And yeah, it's revenge, and it's a chance to split against a top team in this nation, and that is going to be huge on your record come March.
Yeah, and you look at the last time UConn played Creighton, 40 of their 74 points came from James Bouknight. So you go into Saturday's game missing more than half of your scoring. So how are you going to beat Creighton? Because Creighton scores a lot of points. You got to play better on offense by driving and kicking. You look at Tyrese Martin's corner 3 yesterday that cut it to 71-70. That was a prime example of drive and kick offense. Brandon Adams drove, he drew the defense, he kicked it out to Martin, who was wide open. Splash. So yeah, this Creighton game, it's a massive game. It's really going to alter the trajectory of UConn's season. It's a win they really, really need. You're playing so few games this season that every game matters that much more. And also, you got to win for the mental aspect of it. It was a week since they played DePaul. It's going to be almost a week between the St. John's and Creighton game. Now, if you lose this Creighton game, you're coming back home for a game against Butler, and you're not feeling good about yourself. You're not feeling confident. So, big game Saturday, noon game, another early one, so get your hot sauce ready. But with that, we're going to bring it to our Hurley Juice moment of the week. Take it away, Coach.
Let's go Huskies!
All right, thank you all for listening if you reached it to this point. For Noam Watt, I'm Matt Goepfert. Hopefully we'll have some happy podcasts next week. See you next time.